Your immune system is fighting right now. But some of those defenses aren't human. The evidence comes from a field that barely existed 20 years ago. Ancient genomics. Every day, your body identifies and destroys thousands of threats. Viruses, bacteria, parasites. Most people assume this entire system evolved within our species. But over the past 15 years, genomic research has revealed something that complicates that story entirely. It started with bone fragments, tiny samples from individuals who died tens of thousands of years ago. A significant portion of the genes that control your immune response didn't come from modern humans at all. They came from Neanderthals. And they may be the reason you're alive. For most of human history, the textbook story went like this. Neanderthals lived in Europe and Western Asia for 300,000 years. Modern humans arrived from Africa roughly 60,000 years ago. The two species overlapped for perhaps 10,000 years. For 10,000 years, two species of human walked the same valleys. Then the Neanderthals disappeared, gone extinct. End of story. In 2010, Svante P. Bebo published the first complete Neanderthal genome, and the results changed everything. The announcement made headlines in every major science publication on the planet. The genome showed something nobody expected. Neanderthal DNA was inside us. Between 1 and 4% of the DNA in every non-African person alive today traces back to Neanderthals. That means interbreeding happened. The discovery forced a complete revision of the human origin story because the Neanderthal DNA wasn't distributed randomly. It clustered around immunity, not once, multiple times across thousands of years of coexistence in the Levant and Europe. But here is the part that no one anticipated. The Neanderthal DNA that survived wasn't random. Natural selection kept the segments that helped, and the category with the strongest signal of positive selection was the immune system. In 2011, a team led by Laurent Tabi, Rached at Stanford, published a landmark study in the journal Science. They examined the HLA genes, the human leukocyte antigen system. These are the genes that teach your immune cells to distinguish self from invader. Without functional HLA genes, the immune system is blind. It cannot tell friend from foe. Researchers can now identify which HLA variants each individual carries and trace their evolutionary origin. HLA genes are the most diverse genes in the entire human genome. The more variants a population carries, the wider the range of pathogens it can recognize. And where did some of the most useful HLA variants come from? And the Stanford team found that many of our best variants came from Neanderthals. In some populations, over half of certain HLA variants trace back to archaic humans. In Papua New Guinea, one Denisovan-derived HLA allele reaches over 90% frequency. Those numbers don't happen by accident. Natural selection actively favored these variants. The Neanderthal HLA variants weren't just surviving. They were winning, outcompeting the purely modern human versions in population after population. 5 years later, in 2016, a second breakthrough confirmed the pattern. Michael Dannemann and colleagues at the Max Planck Institute studied the toll-like receptor genes. TLR genes are the sentries at the gate. They sit on the surface of immune cells. They detect the molecular signatures of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. When they fire, they trigger the body's inflammatory response. 3 of those sentry genes came directly from Neanderthals: TLR1, 6, and 10. In modern Europeans, over 50% carry the Neanderthal version of at least one of these genes. They weren't just inherited. They were actively selected for. Modern humans leaving Africa had no immunity to European pathogens. The reason is straightforward. Modern humans leaving Africa had never encountered European pathogens. Neanderthals had been fighting those same pathogens for hundreds of thousands of years. Their immune genes were pre-adapted to the local disease environment. 300,000 years versus 0. The evolutionary advantage was overwhelming. By interbreeding, modern humans acquired a ready-made immune toolkit for surviving in a continent they'd never lived in before. The shortcut was enormous. What would have taken thousands of generations was accomplished in a single generation of interbreeding. One generation of interbreeding transferred hundreds of thousands of years of immune evolution. But the immune story doesn't stop at HLA and TLR genes. It goes much deeper. A Stanford study showed roughly half of all functional Neanderthal gene variants connect to immune defense. Not skin, not hair, not metabolism. Immunity accounts for the largest single category of beneficial Neanderthal DNA in modern humans. Every new analysis confirms the same pattern. Immune genes are disproportionately retained. The OACE gene cluster on chromosome 12 is one example. These genes produce enzymes that destroy viral RNA inside infected cells. The Neanderthal versions trigger a stronger antiviral response, and they've been positively selected. The phylogenetic analysis leaves no ambiguity. These variants crossed the species boundary. Then came the finding that made global headlines. Then, in September 2020, Zeeberg and P. Fibo published a finding that made headlines worldwide. In 2020, researchers found a Neanderthal gene linked to severe COVID. Hugo Zeeberg and Svante P.B. identified a stretch of DNA on chromosome 3. That region doubles the risk of severe respiratory failure from COVID-19. That entire stretch of DNA is inherited from Neanderthals, 60,000 years old and still active. The distribution is striking. Roughly 50% of people in South Asia carry it. About 16% of Europeans carry it. In East Asia, the variant was almost entirely purged by natural selection. Different populations, different selection pressures. The same variant, radically different fates. The geographic distribution of Neanderthal immune variants is now one of the most studied patterns in human genetics. The same gene variant that likely helped Neanderthals survive ancient respiratory infections became a vulnerability against a novel virus in the 21st century. But here's the twist. The immune gifts from Neanderthals come with a cost. The same genes that saved ancient humans are now causing modern diseases. The same aggressive immune response that protected ancient humans from Ice Age pathogens now misfires against the body's own tissues. Studies have linked specific Neanderthal immune gene variants to increased risk of Crohn's disease, lupus, type 2, diabetes, and allergic hypersensitivity. The connection between ancient immune genes and modern autoimmune disease is now well established. The evolutionary logic is brutal. A hyperactive immune system is still better than a weak one that lets you die of infection at age 5. In the Neanderthal world, overactive immunity was essential. Wound infections, parasites, cave diseases. Neanderthal skeletons show extraordinary rates of healed injuries, broken bones, puncture wounds, blunt force trauma. They lived hard, and their immune systems had to match. The Shanidar cave specimens alone show more trauma than most modern emergency rooms see in a year. Every broken bone was an infection risk. Strong immunity meant survival. The problem is, we don't live in caves anymore, but the genes haven't changed. Modern hygiene and antibiotics present a radically different challenge to an Ice Age immune system. Without the constant parasite load that kept the immune system occupied, those aggressive Neanderthal-derived genes have nothing external to fight, so they turn inward. The deeper researchers dig into Neanderthal immune introgression, the more complex the picture becomes. The STAT2 gene on chromosome 12 carries a Neanderthal-derived variant associated with increased resistance to tuberculosis. Tuberculosis has killed more humans than any other single infectious disease in history. The Neanderthal STAT2 variant increased the inflammatory response to mycobacterial infection. It helped contain the bacteria before it spread through the lungs. For thousands of years, any genetic advantage against tuberculosis meant survival. Tuberculosis leaves its signature on bones, Ancient skeletons across Europe show the same damage pattern, but that same heightened inflammatory response is now linked to increased susceptibility to inflammatory bowel conditions in carriers of the variant. Every Neanderthal immune gene tells the same story: protection with a price. The interleukin-12 pathway carries Neanderthal variants that enhance the fever response. Fever is one of the oldest and most effective immune defenses. It slows pathogen replication while accelerating immune cell activity. The Neanderthal variant amplifies this response. Higher fever, faster deployment, stronger initial containment. But in a modern context with antibiotics readily available, that amplified fever response contributes to cytokine storm risk in severe infections. What once saved lives in limestone caves now complicates treatment in modern hospitals. The pattern is consistent across every gene examined. Ancient advantage, modern vulnerability. The same variant, different outcomes depending on the century. The question researchers are now asking is whether this knowledge can be used to improve medicine. If a patient carries the Neanderthal TLR variant that increases inflammatory response, that information could guide anti-inflammatory treatment choices. Knowing which ancient genes you carry could change how your doctor treats you. If a patient carries the chromosome 3 COVID risk haplotype, early intervention protocols could be activated sooner. The field of paleogenomic medicine is still in its earliest stages, but the potential is enormous. 60,000 years of evolutionary data encoded in your genome, waiting to be read by modern medicine. The technology to read that data already exists. The clinical frameworks to act on it are being built. In barely 15 years, the field has gone from discovering interbreeding happened at all to mapping exactly which immune genes were inherited and what they do in modern bodies. Your immune system is a hybrid, part human, part Neanderthal. The genes that help you fight infection today were forged in a different body, a different species, tens of thousands of years before civilization existed. They survived because Neanderthals had already solved the problem. The interbreeding wasn't a mistake. For the immune system, it may have been the most important event in human survival outside Africa. The Neanderthals were not just an evolutionary dead end. They were an immune library. The autoimmune conditions and overactive inflammation are the price for that 60,000-year-old debt. What happens when we finally understand the full Neanderthal immune legacy? But here's the question nobody has answered yet. We've mapped a fraction of the Neanderthal immune legacy. The rest is still waiting. Only a fraction of the Neanderthal immune legacy has been mapped. The studies so far have examined dozens of genes out of thousands. New sequencing technology is making it possible to read ancient genomes faster and cheaper than ever before. Thousands of ancient bones sit in museum collections, carrying Neanderthal data never sequenced. What other immune genes might be Neanderthal in origin? What diseases might we understand better once the full picture is mapped? Your immune system is still fighting with borrowed weapons, and science is only beginning to understand which ones came from where. If this changed how you think about your own body, subscribe. More DNA evidence next week. The Neanderthals are gone, but their fight lives on inside every cell that defends you. Sources and studies cited in this video are linked in the description below.